One thing I want to do today is to share a more accurate portrait or portrayal of Jesus. That doesn't mean you're going to hear like some religious fanaticism, and so on. But I want to share a more accurate portrayal. I've done that at times in various forms. One time I did a talk here, Jesus and Buddha, just giving you examples of the comparisons and similarities and differences and so on. But I want to do kind of an accurate portrayal. A lot of people do not realize that this is not a mythological character, but here's one of the cool things about Jesus. First of all, he's a human being. It's not a God that left heaven and came to earth. It's someone who chose to come to earth and remember that he is God. And he's teaching us the exact same thing. All the things I have done, you shall do and more. He didn't say 75% of what I've done, you will do and more, or 5%. All that I've done, and even more. Why more? Because there are people that aren't quite ready yet. He's saying this is going to be kind of freaky. I'm going to bring people back from the dead and all kinds of freaky, cool things. But you guys are going to do even freakier. So get your freak on and, let's move and groove and let's just accept there's nothing you can't do. In fact, one day, instead of, tensing at the idea, when can I get to do more? I want to manifest a car or a relationship. He's saying to us basically, one day you're going to laugh at all the ridiculous things you've ever done thinking you were a limited being. It won't just be people that are starting to sort of manifest a little more. It's going to be laughing at any time you thought you couldn't. Rather than working to, laughing at the past. So he's teaching us this. And Jesus, Edgar Casey said, Jesus is the man, Christ is the spirit. And that's important for us to understand as well. Jesus is a person. He had lifetimes and generally devotional lifetimes. Always, kind of connected to God, but he was naughty at times too. He was connected to God, but still doing what he thought as a man you're supposed to do. Because in ancient times, war was what you thought was normal or whatever. So he participated in war and did all kinds of things. But he was a holy warrior. He still believed that he was connected to God and wanted to do God's will. But he was doing it as it was translated to a human being of that time. But some people don't know that. We even get rude comments posted online when I talk about Jesus being a man or, and you can imagine who and why they would do that. But, Jesus having lifetimes. Nowhere in the Bible does it, on and on and on. So the Bible does tell you about reincarnation and various times. But, the most blatant is that John the Baptist had been Elijah in his previous lifetime. And Jesus blatantly says that. So it's clearly in there. But also effort was made to remove reincarnation as much as they could from the Bible. And I'm not saying that's a big conspiracy thing. It's just what they did. There was a notion, an idea, a theory that people should be taught they get only one shot and therefore obey the church. That's what they were taught. If you're not obeying the church, you don't get a second shot at this. You're just going to hell. So it was a really convenient kind of philosophy. So that's that. But what people also don't understand is there were letters between Romans and other people of the time talking about Jesus. When historians and theologians, all these people that are heavy thinkers, they have problems. So they just don't know how to feel. They don't know how to have faith. They don't know what's real. So they have to overthink. Overthinking. They become fundamentalists, emphasis on the word mental. But they just work their brains, smoke coming out theirs, to try to, and most of the time it's sad because they're trying to disprove anything good. And it's not so, man. Good things have happened on this planet, and they're real, they're true. Miraculous things. So in the life of Jesus, you actually have letters that and again, theologians are out there saying, well, we don't know for sure that, stop. Pilate wrote to Caesar and said, there's a man, and gave a description of him. And he also sent letters to him saying, my hand was forced by the people in Jerusalem to crucify this man. So there are letters. Some of them you find in the lost books of the Bible, books that were removed from or just simply not included in the Bible when it was being assembled. But this first letter I'm going to read. And there's reasons. I'm reading specific portions not to give you a history lesson, but to actually give you a feeling of what even the people at the time saw and experienced with this person, Jesus. So this is Pilate talking to Caesar, a letter he sends in. He says, a young man appeared in Galilee preaching in the name of God. At first I was apprehensive that his designs were to stir up the people against the Romans, but my fears were soon dispelled. This Jesus of Nazareth spoke rather as a friend. So great was the difference between him and those listening to him. And listen, I'm giving you even a physical description that you will find consistent with various sources. Contrary to what you read in traditional sources, magazines, nowadays they're even starting to do movies about him and show him like short-haired. That's not even the custom of the time. And they give him short hair because they want to get away from that whole peace, love, hippie look that he once had, you know? So great was the difference between him and those listening. His golden-colored hair and beard gave him the appearance of a celestial being. He appeared to be about 30. Never have I seen a sweeter or more serene countenance. What a contrast between him and his hearers. Never have I read in the works of philosophers anything that can compare to the maxims of Jesus. And then he says, Jesus tended to provoke the Jews. And when any of these books or letters talk about Jews, it's not talking about Jewish people. It's talking about religious leaders of Jerusalem, the Sanhedrin members. And I'll also add this. When he's talking about Jewish leaders, it's not Jewish leaders only, because there are stories of Jesus going to other countries, if you read the right sources. No religious leaders liked him. Any country. It's not the Jews. He went to the Americas. According to most Native American tribes, they have stories about Jesus having visited here. The priests in almost every nation, India, Greece, wherever, they didn't like him because he tended to put them out of work. You know, because there's politics and money involved in religion. So the fundamentalists of these traditions, any tradition, they strained around him. They didn't like him because he was talking about direct connection to God. They wanted, no, they have to come to us. So whether it was shamanic peoples or, individuals in tribes and so forth, or whether it was large civilizations like the Romans, he didn't appeal to many of these leaders. So it goes on to say, Jesus would say things like, scribes and Pharisees, you are a race of vipers. You resemble painted sepulchres, which is a tomb. You appear well unto men, but you have death within you. No, you can just imagine why they were irritated by him. Complaints were daily made at the praetorium against the insolence of Jesus. So Pilate's saying, not what we see in movies where they came once. He's saying that he had complaints coming to him all the time. So he says, so I wrote to Jesus a message, requested him an interview with him to come and visit me. And he came. You know that in my veins flows Roman blood. I'm incapable of fear or emotional weakness. This is Pilate, who even historians say this guy was vicious. He says, when the Nazarene made his appearance, my feet were stuck like fastened to the floor, the marble pavement, and I trembled in every limb, though the Nazarene was as calm as innocence itself. When he came up to me, he stopped, and by a certain signal, he seemed to say, I am here, but he didn't even say a word. There was nothing about him that was repelling in his character, yet I felt too awed and tremulous to approach him. Jesus said I unto him at last, and my tongue even faltered, Jesus of Nazareth, for the last 3 years I've granted you ample freedom of speech. Your words are those of a sage. I know not whether you read Socrates or Plato or the greats, but your discourses elevate you far above even those philosophers. However, I must not conceal from you that your discourses have raised up against you powerful enemies. Yours are doubly incensed against you on account of your discourses being so severe about their conduct. My request, says Pilate, is that you be more circumspect and moderate in your discourses, and more considerate of them, lest you arouse the pride of these enemies and they employ the instruments of law against you. The Nazarene replied, Pilate is reporting, Prince of this earth, your words proceed not from true wisdom. I say unto you, before the rose of the Sharon blossoms, Sharon is considered to be like a rose-like plant, but not. It's a summer flower. Before the Sharon blossoms, the blood of the just will be spilt. He's predicting his own death. And Pilate says, your blood shall not be spilt. I, with deep emotion, told him, You are more precious in my estimation on account of your wisdom than all of the turbulent and proud Pharisees who are against you. I will protect you against them. My praetorium shall be an asylum day and night for you. There's all kinds of things I'm saying here. I'm talking about even you and I that sometimes feel like our spirituality is going to be protected. And it doesn't always happen the way we would hope. Jesus' response to all this protection promised, Jesus carelessly, just very carefree, shook his head and said with a grave and divine smile, when the day shall come, there will be no asylum for the Son of Man, neither in the earth nor under the earth. The asylum of the just is here, as he pointed to the heavens. So saying, he disappeared like a supernatural light. Behind him, the curtains of the basilica, to my great relief, for I felt a very heavy burden overcome me. Now, he says, this is Pilate saying, here's where the leaders started weaving their web. The great feast of the Jews was approaching. It's the Passover. The city was overflowing with tumultuous populace, clamoring for the death of the Nazarene. They seized upon Jesus, continued vociferating, crucify him, crucify him. The Pharisees were the avowed enemies of Jesus. And it's interesting because in the land of the time, Pharisees, the priests and all, the Sadducees, another group, and the Essenes. The Essenes were kind of the Gnostics or New Agers of the time. They were an eccentric sect, a small group of people, nowhere in the power or might or prosperity of the others. But Jesus was not. Really, he was not a Jew. He was an Essene more than a Jew. He was born in the bloodline of David, the lineage of Judea, or Jew, but he actually was raised by the Essenes early on. He was more of an Essene than anything else, and his parents both, and their parents were part of the Essene community, but that's another story. Jesus was dragged before the high priest and condemned to death. Every moment increased the number of malcontents. Jerusalem was inundated with crowds from the mountains of Nazareth. All Judea appeared to be pouring into the city. Now, this gets even more interesting. And they talk about his hair, by the way. When they say he's a Nazarene, sometimes they call some of these folks Nazarites, Nazarenes. That was a sect of Essenes. It's not meaning he's a guy from Nazareth, because he's not really from Nazareth. But he's a Nazarite or a Nazarene, which is an Essene community, but that's another story, like I said. So Pilate then says to Caesar, as you know, I've taken a wife who was a Druid. Pilate's wife was from Gaul and was Celtic, but Druid. And he said, and she had the ability to see the future. She did. Weeping and throwing herself at my feet, my prophetess wife came and said, beware, beware, my husband, and touch not this man, for he is holy. Last night I had a vision. He was walking on water. He was flying on the wings of the wind. He spoke to tempests, and they were all obedient to him. Pilate, be careful. Evil awaits you. Okay? And you may have heard, like in Jesus Christ Superstar, they have a song where Pilate says, I had a dream. And it's a song about Pilate having a dream about Jesus that he shouldn't involve. It was not Pilate. That's just that rock opera. The real story is that Pilate's wife had that vision. But what also, the few people that know that don't know that it was because she was taken, like many of the Romans took wives from other countries, especially the Gaul area, and the Celts. But his wife was a Druid, therefore a seeress. So then he says, the Nazarene was brought back to me, asked the people in a severe tone what they demanded. The death of the Nazarene. He said, for what crime? He blasphemed. What blasphemy? He says he was a child of God. Roman justice, said I, punishes no such thing with death. What's wrong with you people? I'm paraphrasing. They said, crucify him, crucify him. There was but one who appeared to be calm in the midst of this entire multitude, and it was Jesus. After many fruitless attempts to protect him from the fury of his merciless prosecutors, I adopted a measure, release Jesus and let him go free. And they said, he has to be crucified. I then ordered, have him scourged, have him whipped. That way he figured all the people would go, and feel sorry for him and break. He said it only made them worse. They just got even more. He calls them these wretches. I mean, this for Pilate, for Romans, heavy, bloodthirsty Romans to think you're a wretch, that's pretty heavy. So often in the civil commotions Often in our civil commotions have I witnessed many furious angers of the multitudes, but nothing could be compared with what I witnessed on this occasion. It might have truly been said that all of the phantoms of hell had assembled in Jerusalem. The crowd appeared in living waves like in the various doorways of the praetorium, with howling screams and shrieks, vociferations, such as never have been seen. I'm trying to build a point of how much hatred. But the hatred, guys, is not just rude people, evil people that don't like you and me. They gossip, they hate, they want to assassinate physically, and character assassination in gossip. But this is also telling us the better you become, the more just enraged the ego becomes. In just explaining it spiritually and psychologically. Forget that there's even anyone else out here. In me, in any one of us, in me, the more I grow, the more the ego is going to feel powerless, and that's exactly the opposite of what it wants to feel. So it's going to go a little nuts, and he's talking about the fervor going on in this crowd. By degrees, once this reaches such a tempest, he says, fine, washes his hands of the whole thing. This is not blood on the Romans' hands. It's not on Jewish people's hands, but it is on religious leaders that live in hypocrisies. All churches that have that kind of thing, if they have it, that's a heavy burden to bear, because you're claiming to be there helping people in the highest form, which is called spiritual living. You're supposed to be, and you're claiming to want to help people spiritually. If you mislead people on that level, you are really in trouble. No, is God going to say, oh, hell? No, you're just going to come back with some really terrible circumstances. You can't hurt people and get away with it. But when you do it by misleading them spiritually, there's a whole new level of karmic circumstance that's going to come back to you. So, Pilate also includes in his letter the crucifixion finally happens. And he says, by degrees the day darkened like a winter's twilight. Jerusalem had vomited forth her indwellers through the funeral gates that leads to Germanica. An air of desolation and sadness envelops me. My guards are endeavoring to keep order. He's describing what happened in that hour. A loud clamor was heard proceeding from Golgotha, which is the place of the skull, they call it the hill that they crucify people, which, borne on the wings, seemed to announce an agony such as never heard by mortal ears. There was this loud booming sound. He says, dark clouds lowered over the pinnacle of the temple and setting over the city covered it as well in a veil. Whilst these appalling scenes of nature were transpiring, there was a dreadful earthquake in Lower Egypt, which filled everyone with fear, even down in Egypt, over in Egypt, and scared superstitious people almost to death. That's how intense it was. The sacrifice was consummated. The crowd was now, even though he was dead, the crowd was still agitated. But what they had witnessed also struck them with terror and remorse, many of them. And after this, an old man, he says, comes to him, to Pilate, and he says, he's crying, and Pilate says to him, what can I do for you? And he says, my name is Joseph of Arimathea, and I would like to bury Jesus. I have a tomb, and I'm going to donate my tomb. Joseph was on the Sanhedrin. He was one of the Pharisees. So they're not all corrupt in any location. There's a mix of things. But Joseph, a lot of people, when this letter was written, would not have known. Joseph, now historically, is known to have been a relative of Jesus, related to Mother Mary. Now we know that, but this is written long ago, and historians are thinking this stuff's fabricated possibly, but these are things people wouldn't have known at that time. So he says, can you grant me the wish to bury him? And he says, yes, you can bury him. A few days after the sepulchre was found empty, his disciples proclaimed all over the country he had risen from the dead. This created even more excitement and nervousness amongst people. And when the great excitement arose about the sepulchre being empty, I sent one of my centurions to check this out, because he had sent the centurion and 100 soldiers to guard the temple, the tomb in the first place. So these are Romans. They don't back down. They're not even allowed to fall asleep when you're on duty, or you get beat to death. To death. That's how intense Roman soldiers were. So they're not slouches in any way. They go to the tomb, 100 of them guarding. And he calls the centurion, well, I'm hearing the tomb is empty. Now imagine, you're up creek, because The guy's body's gone. How did someone slip by 100 soldiers? And at first the soldier, the centurion, is a bit nervous to answer. And then he just kind of cuts to it and says, okay, look, I'm going to tell you what happened. And it's too weird, but he says, he saw a soft and beautiful light over the sepulchre. And behold, the whole place became lit up. And the whole air seemed to be full of voices praising God. At this time there seemed to be a reeling and swimming of the earth, so that he turned sick. This soldier said, I became sick and faint and couldn't stand on my feet. He said, the earth seemed to swim from under me and my senses left me. So there's a description of something very supernatural. And again, people don't believe in these things anymore. I would like you to try to intuit and feel what's happening. Something really marvelous. It was Easter just a couple weeks ago. This would have been good to share then, but too much for some people for a holiday. So I'm still close enough to the holiday to go for it. But just imagine, I would like us to understand, movies portray, and a lot of people say, oh, the movies are all wrong. Not all of them, actually. But the old story where he takes a big cross down this cobblestone, boom, boom, boom. And it's not a whole cross. You carry a cross piece when you're being crucified. You're carrying the cross piece. They lift it, because there's a hole in it, they lift it up over these posts and drop it down. So you're carrying not a cross, but a cross piece. And it's interesting because this symbol, vertical, represents God. A cross represents the material world, the veil between God and earth. So you're carrying your cross means I'm carrying the burden of illusion. And it always kills people. Nobody survives crucifixion. When he comes back to life, he's breaking that code. He's breaking that law. So there's a lot of great symbolism to it. Jesus is not just a male or this. He's not seeing himself as a male. He's seeing himself as a human being who decided to remember he was Christ or God. Saying that any of us can do that. It's not about male or female or Jewish or Gentile. So he's carrying this cross piece. And I want you to keep tuning into this, because what he's doing is, I'm fulfilling all the major stories. If a person's into mythology, then the story of Christ means instead of sun comes back in the horizon, over the horizon bringing warmth to us after a cold night, or it comes back after winter, he says, I'm going to be that light. And so are you. When people worship miracle workers, what does he say? You can do this too. He's really all about embodying God presence, like mastery. So he's fulfilling, and he says, I'm here to fulfill the law. Part of the law are those 10 commandments. And there's going to be a little interesting twist to this at the end. He's coming to fulfill. So whether you're into mythology, this is like your star performer in mythology. If you're talking about metaphysics, if you're talking about astrology, everything you can imagine to be a science or a metaphysical science, this guy's embodying all of this. So bear with me then. So Pilate closes out his letter to Caesar saying, I'm just giving you a report, and I am your servant, Caesar. Now here's another one. The governor of Judea writes to Tiberius Caesar, the Jews accused a man who had wrought many cures and good works. He caused the blind to see, he cleansed lepers, raised the dead, and some were grievously afflicted by demons. By a word he made them reasonable and caused them to become wise and honorable. Now, when he was crucified, darkness came over all the world. The sun was altogether hidden. The sky appeared dark while it was yet day rather, so that the stars were seen, though still they had their luster obscured. Wherefore, I suppose your excellency is not unaware. The whole world, according to reports in Roman history, the whole world and all the different satellites, out there, outposts and stuff of Rome, they were getting back reports. The whole world went dark when this crucifixion took place. And the moon, which was like blood, a blood moon, the moon was like blood, did not shine all night long, although it was at the full, and the stars of Orion made lamentation, because of the transgression committed against even the stars. And the third hour of the night, the sun appeared as it never shone before, and the whole heaven became bright. And as lightnings come in a storm, so certain men of lofty stature in beautiful array and indescribable glory appeared in the air, and a countless host of angels crying out, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace and goodwill to man. And then he says, Now when the letters came to the city of the Romans, this is about another letter we have historically stored, British Museum and other places. This is another report. This is now Pilate went on trial in Rome for killing Jesus. He was on trial. Caesar called him and said, called out to him in letters and said, hey, I hear you have this guy named Jesus. Bring him here. Because the Romans, which were descendants, you could say, of the Greeks, believed in gods, guys. Believed in gods. Gods, goddesses, right? They believed in these things. They weren't cold. They were cold people militarily, but they believed in gods. So he said, I hear you have one of the living gods. Send him to me. Well, that would be the guy we put to death. So Pilate's basically saying, letters came to the city of the Romans, and Caesar got all this and sent for him. When you saw such great signs, why did you dare put him to death? Pilate said, it wasn't me, man. I'm paraphrasing. The Jewish leaders forced me. And Caesar said, when they delivered him to you, you could have just put security guards around him and sent him here. And when Caesar said this, because he said these words, Caesar closed his statement to Pilate and said, for by such miracles, Jesus was manifesting the awaited Christ. When he said the word Christ, all of the statues in Rome crumpled. And everybody became afraid. What just happened? All the people were filled and trembling because the word of Christ caused the fall of their gods and statues. Caesar was then filled with anger, ordered a decree against the Jews, and he actually sent soldiers to sack Jerusalem, which historically did happen. And over the next generation, they sacked it so thoroughly, Jerusalem ceased to be a race and a city as we know it until recently, comparatively recently. And Caesar resolved to cut Pilate's head off. So he actually had Pilate's head cut off. And Pilate's wife was there. And when it happened, according to this lost book of the Bible, this story, when his head was cut off, it said an angel came to take Pilate. And so she was, I guess, in such a state, her heart failed, and she died, and the angel took her as well. Hard things for some people to believe, but it's amazing. Then we have a letter from a Roman soldier. Separate topic, a separate letter. He writes, there has appeared in our times a man of great power and virtue called Jesus Christ. The people call him a prophet of truth. His disciples call him the Son of God. He raises the dead, heals infirmities. He's a man of fair height. He was 6 foot. He has a venerable aspect, and his beholders can both fear and love him. His hair is of a bronze brown color, like a hazelnut, straight down to the ears, and then becomes curly. And below the ears it becomes wavy and curly, with a bright reflection flowing over his shoulders. It is parted in two on the top of the head after the manner of the Nazarenes, because that's a hairstyle that they wore in that particular sect of people, which is also descendant of the guy known as, we can call him Hercules in Greece, but Samson. He was also part of that same tribe and had that's why the long hair. And they say he lost his power when he had his hair removed. Remember the story, Samson? Well, it's because he was a Nazarite or a Nazarene, and their manner of hair was to be long. If you lost your hair, it was a huge humility, and you lost everything because it was your religious statement. His brow was smooth, very cheerful, with a face without a wrinkle or spot. His nose and mouth are faultless. His beard, the same color of his hair, not long, but divided at the chin. That was also the custom. His aspect is very simple and mature. His eyes are changeable and bright. He is firm in his reprimands, sweet and amiable in his admonitions, cheerful without loss of gravity. He was known to weep, though. His stature is straight, his hands and arms beautiful to behold. He is the most beautiful amongst all men. That's a soldier writing that. We switch gears slightly. Edgar Casey. Jesus was 6 foot tall, weighed 175 pounds, wore a pearl gray white seamless robe. His hair was long, reddish brown, even golden at times, and slightly curly. He was sometimes stern, but also happy and had good humor. Are you seeing consistency here? Yes. Casey readings, Caesar, Pilate, soldiers. And then one more I'm going to share. from a book called Mary Magdalene, From the Heart of Love, and it's by a gal I met once. Her name is Gail Swanson. She's probably watching or might be watching, but I would check out her book because I think it's one of the best ever, kind of channeled Mary Magdalene. Now, whatever you believe or not about channeling and Magdalene and so on, it's really, really amazing, powerful. It was he that showed me divinity that reigned within. If only you could hear the sound of his voice, she's describing Jesus. He came to show us not who he was, but who we are. Walking with him, talking with him, looking at him, caring for him, being completely mesmerized by him, the way he looked, the way he spoke, the way he walked. You could just drink him in. All else paled in comparison. If he was out of your sight, you could still feel him, but your eyes would grieve, for he is all you wish to see. Living became like a dream. His eyes were blue, Casey agreed. His eyes were blue, the kind of blue you just get lost in. His voice seemed to come from another place, for it went into you and completely filled you. He was firm in his words, but ever so loving. He was full of joy. He was very lighthearted. He could be easily annoyed in certain circumstances for the bickering and pettiness of people, but he always forgave it. The way he loved women was not understood and infuriated many. The women just adored him. Some will be angered, for the message is strong, and the vibration it carries frightens those who are layered with guilts and shames, ego, and whatever else. He wearied at times. Oftentimes a sadness would fall upon him, and he would feel overwhelmed. Because of this, he understands all human emotions. He was not exempt from feeling these things, but he would pray and ask for guidance. What transpired when he would speak, it would be as if an invisible force would just envelop you, and the whole world would seem to fall away, and you absolutely knew you were hearing and participating in something not of this world. Beautiful, yeah? Just those words are doing what she's saying that he does. It's like just poetry in motion, just this whole, and you tune into this. We're not hearing just what movies made of this guy. One movie's showing him with a greater kind of energy about him, another all painful, just all about his crucifixion and the pain of this person. These sources, which I'm not reading excerpts from on this, but these sources tell us one other consistent thing. Casey, the channeled sources, and historic, they tell us and you heard some of this, he had a lightness about him. People want to make it like he was in pain and pain and pain. These sources tell us that, Casey says, even on the way to the cross, he smiled. It's hard for us to understand. That's why we don't usually portray it in movies that way. Because it's hard to understand that he could be on his way to the cross and still have a lightness. One of the lost books of the Bible tells us he falls one of those times, and the women at the side that we hear in the Bible as weeping on the side of the road. He says to them, it's added in the lost books, what else was done. They just say he fell, they were weeping, and he moves on. The other books that fill this in say, and he looked at them and said, do not believe in what you see. And that's part of what he's trying to get across. Amazing person, this countenance about him, this glow. But what is all this describing? It's not, this is what you and I are heading for. This is what you and I are destined to. He could be beautiful. He could be proportioned, beautiful hair that glows. All of this is wonderful, but that's still only as good as it gets as a human. Even greater than that is the Christ Spirit filling him. That's the only way he was able to pull off the physical, meaning his balance and demeanor and so on. This man saying, I'm going to protect you. You know what most of us would do? Yes, please. He's saying, actually, protection of this world doesn't do anything. So when you and I try to have just enough money to protect ourselves and just enough vitamins and whatever, I get all that human stuff. I get it. He's trying to teach us everything you were looking for comes from here. Your connection to God. That doesn't mean you should live carelessly and rely on your connection to God. But your connection to God first. And your connection to God is still going to tell you to drink more water if you need water, to take your nutrients if you need. It's not going to betray you on a human level. You're not going to hear a voice saying, man, I'm glad you're over with that. It's going to say, but you're on earth. Furthermore, this guidance is so spectacular that, believe it or not, sometimes the divine God that doesn't even believe you're a body, doesn't believe you need nutrients or anything else of the nature's laws that are, that you're limited to any of that, And yet that being's going to say one day, I need you to go to the health store. Ooh, I thought that was an illusion. No, I go to the health store. Okay, I'm going to go to the health store. What do you want me to I'll get some B complex. B complex. And then we make a religion out of it. And the Lord channel, B complex is the B complex. B. I get it. It's B complex. You know? And make a religion out of it. Go ahead, make a religion out of it. You know, and God's like, Jesus Christ, these people. No. But, and all God was, the way God works out of all that complexity and beauty and channeled, and God was like, whatever. I have nothing to do with that. The reason I wanted you to go to the store and buy B complex is because there's going to be someone there who's hurting, and I want you to run into them. And I want you to smile or say something that's going to change their life. That's how God works. It doesn't care what you think why you're going. I was guided to go get fuel in my car, and when I pumped the gas, it was 11.11 on the dollars. You know, it was all. I get all that's true. It is. Those things happen, but I'm telling you, God mostly wants us to heal our belief in separation, which is manifested in our relations. God says, I want you to love each other. I don't want to love anybody, man. People are jerks, but 11.11 on my pump, I'm gonna worship. I'm gonna put flowers at the base of the gas pump, and a crown of flowers on top of it, and and paint it purple, That's what spiritual humans do, or even worse, they can make more religious things out of it. And we're being told, do you love anymore? That's all. Well, I was in the middle of worshiping a gas pump and somebody honked because they wanted to pull up and get gas. They're so irreverent. They're rude. They don't get it. And God's going, they're not the only ones who don't get it. I sent you to heal and you're complaining. So, sort of taking all this, sort of another direction. I'm not impressed by skepticism when it comes to believing that love is a lie. That miracles are a lie, that these things can't happen. I was just on tour, and somebody brought this up in an email to me from another church that I'm no longer going to. And they said, Michael, we're confused about being at this church that we go to. We know you no longer come here, but we're struggling more and more. Our minister says there's no such thing as like miracles and immaculate conceptions and, naming various kinds of miracles, resurrection. I mean, it's a spiritual teacher that's telling him none of these things exist. Now, part of me as a spiritual teacher wants to just thump this person in the head and say, get out of here, and let's get them a good spiritual teacher, But I know better. This is their test. If they don't step up and say, we believe in these things, and get someone that represents that, then they get what they deserve. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to sound harsh. I'm just saying it matches. That's what you get. Well, we're struggling with it. Then get someone else. And if you don't, I don't want to hear about it anymore. I gave you advice. So there's these people that just say none of this stuff's real. The Noah's Ark. Truth is there were many arks, but there were arks. There was a flood. One of them is recorded in lots in Native American traditions. There was a flood. But the Jews also talk, the Israelites, people of Israel, the Hebrew people. They believe in the flood, and they had somebody named Noah. And we think, well, it's kind of just, there's no way, I know how it sounds. It seems ludicrous. Really? 2 animals of every kind throughout the planet? No, it's just 2 of every kind from their region. And it's the same from other regions, other arks, whether you believe it or not. And the ark did come to rest in Ararat. And they did find it. They've done all their excavations they could do so far. And it's it's the same exact length, the ruins that they found. Same length. The ark was wood, and it actually petrified. So it's there forever now. And they found, you can measure because of just the leftover. It's almost like doing excavations in the sea, when you're doing archaeology, sea archaeology and all that marine archaeology. They can put this stuff together, which is pretty amazing. But they found the ark. What's more is there's stones that they found nearby that today we call, in ancient ships, we call them anchor stones. They used to use carved for anchors rock. And these ancient stones are the stones from the ark. And there's certain carvings on them that tell us that that's what they were. But people just don't want to believe these things. One of Jesus' lifetimes was a character named Enoch, who was a grandfather of Noah. So this Enoch was actually telling Noah, guiding Noah to prepare for the flood. So Jesus even weaves into that story in a strange roundabout way. But Jesus had these lifetimes, various characters. I'm not going to go into that. I've done that before. But this shroud of Turin is real. Jesus turned to light, and it left a photo imprint on the cloth. You're going to go around and around with people that want to keep thinking about things. But there's just a point where you go, yeah, this makes sense. It's likely so. Because he just, in a flash. But there are too many sources that tell us this is likely what happened. So then it makes sense that the cloth is his burial cloth. There's also even stranger stories still, like the crucifixion. The stars do strange things. The moon does strange things. Why are the Romans, who have accurate historians, telling us the world seemed to go dark for a while? What's happening? It's almost like it's an eclipse, a full eclipse, times 100, times 1,000. When an eclipse happens, you're taking the sun that is a certain distance from us and the moon that's a certain distance, two completely different sized objects in space, at inconceivable distances different from one another. And they happen to match up exactly to create an eclipse when we're viewing it from here. Is that making sense so far? That in itself is pretty cool, pretty supernatural. But the sun is representing our spiritual self. The moon is representing our emotional self. And when you're viewing it from the earth, your human self. When an eclipse has happened, technically, when it's happening, all parts of yourself are lining up. And people now just forget the magic behind these kinds of things. Same as they lose the magic of other things. Jesus walking on water. These brilliant theologians, historians, scientists, they come up with things like this. They say, okay, look, if there even was a Jesus, which we don't have evidence of, we do. But if there even was a Jesus, we figured it out. He didn't walk on water. It was low tide. These are people that are academics, and they're often highly paid to tell you things like that. Now I didn't even like school. I'm not an academic. I'm not going to compete or compare with theologians and scientists. Not even, and I don't want to. All I know is this. I would ask a question like a child. But Mommy, Daddy, weren't the fishermen, Jesus and some of his apostles, weren't they fishermen? Yes. Weren't they experts at water? Yes. How did they not realize it was low tide? Why didn't they write, and Jesus walketh on the loweth tideth? That's not what happened. When these guys said the seas were heaving, and when they said he's walking on water, just trust these people. When they go and investigate indigenous peoples around the world, they almost never ask them who they are and what they feel or what they do. They tell them, we're scientists and we figured you out. If you don't ask the people, how are you going to know? If you don't ask a plant what its purpose is, how are you going to know? We'll tell it. We'll just put it in a microscope, break it up, and we'll tell you. They can only tell you what they've figured out with their heads. But the heart knows things the mind knows not of. The heart is the intuition, it's the soul, it connects, not analyzes from a distance, it connects as if it is, one with. So that's why you can know these things are true. When the big earthquake took place, there are many now coming out saying, yes, Jerusalem cracked and broke up. It was like earthquake and it cracked the place up. Now the mystics would then add something to that. Jesus is on the cross and blood is flowing from his heart, the organ. They punctured him through the side and they penetrated the pericardium and the heart. So the water of the pericardium and the blood from the heart flowed out his side. Some people are saying Jesus actually never died. He just took a little special something to go to sleep. Looked like he was dead, and then they gave him an antidote. A couple days later, as long as it's not miraculous, they're okay with it. He died. It's the whole point. It doesn't make any sense. Anybody can take it or pretend take a sleeping pill, Excedrin PM, go to sleep. It doesn't mean you were dead. So when you woke up in the morning, there was nothing miraculous about it. He was killed. He was beat constantly, mind you. When they saw him, in the movies you see this a little, and sometimes you even think, oh, this is gruesome. It's nowhere close to how gruesome it was. Every chance they had, they would punch him in the face again. Every time he would walk by, they would spit him. They hated him. Who's they I'm talking about? The ego.
That's right.
That's all. The ego does this to Jesus. He's this level of consciousness. The ego's this level, and it's trying to bring him down to its level by trying to beat him to death. But it does it to you and me. Every time you have faith in something miraculous, somebody called me just yesterday and said, I have a really big problem because I was following some really great guidance. It was all lining up, but then something went wrong. What did I do wrong? Am I guilty for something? Did I do something bad? Look how quick we assume we're wrong, we're bad. I said, what makes you think you did anything wrong? I would, if I were in your shoes, ask myself this. If this is a test, how do I want to do on my test? Judging myself as bad, F minus, not so good. I have to, when these things happen, and Jesus is demonstrating it, watch them. They're beating me up and I still don't give them power. I still don't buy it. They're telling me I'm nothing, but I believe. So he says, Father, have you forsaken me? But that's the human speaking. I'm afraid. Nothing comes to him. He doesn't get to see the clouds part and get, his mind changed into something good like when you want it. Instead, he just concludes it himself. Never mind, got it. Into your hands I surrender my spirit. That's not just his giving up the ghost when he dies. This is telling you, when you have a problem and you doubt that God's with you, not supporting you in the situation, hold faith anyway and say, into your hands I surrender this phone bill. Into your hands I surrender this relationship. And just remain faithful. Because he didn't resurrect 3 seconds later. He went into the tomb. He went into hell, as some people say. He went into the darkest parts of himself. Why? To commiserate? No. He went into the darkest part to say, hey, darkest parts, get over here. You're going with me. We're going to ascend into new levels of consciousness. That's what he did. He took it all with him. All parts of himself, shining light into those parts. So there was this major eclipse and the earthquake, the cracking of the ground, his blood spilling out into the ground. And then they realized, some people have come to realize and say that they've proven this, that his blood poured into the ground on Golgotha and into those crevices and buried. And we do know that Solomon had treasure. All of Solomon's treasure, including the Ark of the Covenant, was hidden. We do know that for sure. In Jerusalem, underground. Okay? What happened to it depends on maybe your different beliefs. But, that's where the Knight Templars came in and found the treasure and took it out of the area hundreds of years later. But at this time, Ark of the Covenant and all these things were buried underground. And his blood, according to you would say the mystical interpretation, his blood flows into this crack in the ground and pours upon the Ark of the Covenant. Why? Because the ark, inside the ark, you had the 10 Commandments. And the 10 Commandments represented the old laws. And the main theme, one main theme of the old law, the main theme is that God is one God. But one of the themes underneath all those commandments is the wages of sin are death. So no matter who you are, no matter how good you are or bad you are, you're still going to die because you're a sinner. That's the law of the 10 Commandments. You could say that's the 8th theme. That's the old school law. When Jesus' blood pours upon this, he neutralizes it. He fulfills the law. And the ark then is rendered a higher vibration, let's call it. So some people have claimed to have taken blood samples from this and done tests. And this is all recorded. There's people in labs that record this. And they did blood analysis on the blood in this experience that they found, the ark and all this. Although some people are going to hide it because it's hidden and they say it hasn't been found and all that. But some scientists went and they did blood analysis. Would you believe that the blood that was analyzed had the chromosomes and his, proof genetically of this person who died had a mother but no human father? There was no evidence of the person whose blood this was having had a human father. Cool, huh? So this just gets more and more profound and mystical. That Jesus isn't just like a historic guy, and kind of linear subject matter, guys. Multi-dimensional. It's really inconceivable to the human mind to really get this. All the layers and the mythologies, the cosmos, what was happening cosmologically, astrologically in the heavens when he's born. Nothing was by chance. Everything was lined up perfectly. And historically, he's fulfilling law. Morally, he's teaching how to live guided by Spirit. And this crucifixion was not something he saw himself a victim of. So when people portray that, the victim Jesus, mind you, he is being beat and crucified. But he still chose, this is not real. This does not actually affect me. It's being done. Know the truth, but respect the illusion. It's being done, but it does not have power over me. And if he could do that with crucifixion, then we can do it with phone bills. Or whatever else, broken hearts and all those kinds of things. So when I think of the brutality, instead of going, those Romans or those Jews or those this or that or the others, I just, typical. That's how much our ego hates us. And you go, well, I want to befriend my ego. It doesn't want to be friends. But I'm not telling you there's something there you have to kill, like fight. I'm saying it's a part of us that fears love. That's all it is. A part of us fears love. So the more you become loving, the more it fears you. And to keep you from being you, it's going to attack you, spit upon you in the words of some other people in your life. Bless you. It'll stone you. It'll crucify you. It'll do things all through typically the acts of people. I have known people. A really dear friend. He was part of a really popular band in a region, playing concerts and all this kind of thing. And he got married. He asked me to do the ceremony. I said, sure. I did the ceremony. His best men, his friends were there. Within a couple of days, they kicked him out of the band. They attended his wedding, for God's sakes, and they all knew they were getting rid of him. And they got rid of him because he would not do drugs with them. He was clean, and they thought, this is just, what it was they're doing it, and he was fine. He didn't judge. He was really not judgmental at all. But they would do it, and in their minds, he was their conscience. Just him being in the room, not participating, it made them feel awkward. So to deal with their awkwardness, get rid of him. That's a crucifixion. And these kinds of things happen and have happened in our lives and will happen. And we're just asked, I wouldn't suggest you try to handle it as a human. Because humans, under the same law, the wages of sin are death. You're not going to be able to survive these things humanly. You've got to become more and more spiritual self. I don't mean airy-fairy, but spiritual identity. Powerful. Connected. One of those people, said, this man, when he was reviled and when he struggled, he was in a human body, he would have doubts. But he kept praying to stay connected. These are all messages to us on how to handle these things. So, he maintains a lightness about him. He maintains an ability, even when he's walking and these women are crying. A lot of us would be like, hey, I'm in pain. I don't have time to be giving you solace. And what does he do? He takes time to say, ladies, it's okay. Don't believe in what you see. I think that's amazing. See, that's a healer. Not someone who does healing. It's a healer. Top to bottom, left to right, in and out. Make sense? He sees people in trouble, so he says, how can I help? And he offers them some form of help. Just on the way in today, we're almost done here, but I was just driving and I saw this gal, kind of small framed, I guess you could say, and she had this dolly out on the street corner trying to get this giant boulder onto it. She wasn't going to be able to do any of this other than wish she could do it. There was nothing and I drove by and I stopped, I backed up. You want some help? When you offer people help, you are risking them getting offended, minding your own business. Mind your own business. You don't know what people are going to say. Then don't offer if you're not big enough to be able to handle that. So I back up and I have that moment, should I mind my own business? And you hear that, this is my business. Offering help, not them saying yes. My business is to offer even if they don't say yes. Do you need some help? She's like, what? I thought, I've ticked her off. Do you need some help? Are you kidding? Oh my God, she starts doing this to me. Yes, please, please. So I go over there and boulder, and then, show me where you want it. Are you serious? Well, just, over there somewhere. Yeah, okay, but do you want it to the street side, or do you want it to, because it would look better visually if she's like, oh, this is, and so she's probably even now still going, what just happened? To do right, be helpful, even at the risk of not everybody, accepting it. Do what you can. And if you're so sensitive that you take on an energy or a rejection when people don't accept it well, strengthen yourself. Don't just say, I'm so empathic and everybody's energy destroys me. Step up and be stronger. You can be empathic, but find a core inside that you have an immunity to people's stuff. Edgar Cayce was, if I'm not mistaken, if I recall, he was a triple Pisces. He was very sensitive. Triple Pisces. And he smoked and smoked and smoked. Which you think, he's the father of holistic medicine. That's what he's called in the AMA journal. I mean, this guy he's the father of holistic medicine, and he was a chain smoker. But people don't know. The reason he smoked so much is because of what being a triple Pisces and having stacks of letters from people saying, my child is dying, can you do a reading? Stacked in his house. Every day he saw that stack, and when he wasn't in the room, he knew it was there. It caused him anxiety, and smoking was his attempt to find himself, to ground himself, to calm himself. So sometimes we have this conflict in our minds, like, but why was he a smoker? You have to walk in someone else's moccasins or shoes to understand what's going on with people. I'm not enabling self-abuse or addictions. I'm just saying, even when people are seeming addicts, there's almost no addict that's ever been on this planet that didn't have hypersensitivity. They're always trying to cope with some energetic thing. It's just way too common. Drinking, whatever the addictions, often they are psychological and chemistry in the body, chemicals that, a chemistry that is sensitive. And so the person is trying to cope with that. I had an opera singer once come to me, and she said, Michael, she was overweight, and she said, Michael, can you help me with the weight issues? Now, I can offer this and that, whatever channels through in my sessions. But I told her, if I help you lose weight, you're not going to be able to sing. And she's like, what do you mean? You're singing high vibrational sounds, and your body is having to buffer itself. So miracles are possible. You can do both. It's been done, certainly. For her, however, I felt it was not going to happen. So she had a choice to make. You're singing angelic sounds. So be an angel and not worry about what your body looks like. Angels aren't like, oh, this has gone to my hips. Angels aren't like that. Wings and the beautiful robes. Do I look fat in this? Angels don't think about these things. Become more angelic, and it won't come with weight loss. It's just with being. So the last couple things I want to share, though. Is today really landing? Is it making sense? Yes. Good. I certainly hope you pick up the common theme that I'm talking about. And remember, common themes between all these different sources, his looks. People, I've seen magazines, nationally, internationally known magazines, and people have made movies just on what he really looked like. And they always immediately start Middle Eastern, he's dark hair and dark skin. No. First of all, it's known amongst the right kinds of people that some tribes of Israel, and he's from one tribe of Israel, have lighter skin and lighter hair. Golden colored hair is not unusual to some people of some Israelite tribes, some people of the Judean region. It was not uncommon. So what we portray him to be, some movies, of course, it's kind of strange. You may remember the movie, I think it was The Greatest Story Ever Told, the one we used to watch in the 60s, like Ben-Hur, those old Jesus movies. That, some of those were a little more off because they didn't know as much. But also they were trying to portray it based on religion acceptability. The one that was kind of off a little bit was when they had Max von Sydow played Jesus. And I think he's like Swedish or something. So if you listen to him, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. You could hear it in his voice, and it's like, but that wasn't the worst of that movie. The worst was the soldier at the foot of the cross when Jesus is being crucified. There's a soldier at the foot of the cross looking up to him, and you don't see him, you see kind of the silhouette of the soldier. And this actor is featured in the credits, but you don't really see him much in the movie, but you see his silhouette standing looking up at the cross, and you hear his voice. This truly was the Son of God. It was John Wayne. This truly was the Son of God. And I heard that and I went, wait a minute. That didn't fit very well, So some movies didn't portray well, but just understand the common theme. Some people are really against the most recent one about all the pain, and it was painful. But the director's obsessing on the graphic parts to upset the viewers. But that particular director also had his own issues in here. So his obsession with the pain of Jesus was actually his own obsession of punishing himself as a person. So that's when a person's living out their own stuff in their creation, in their creative projects or whatever. So the last thing I want to share. Remember, who we're talking about here is your Christ self, not historic, just a person named Jesus. And remember those persecutors, there's people arguing, oh my God, people are making us look bad, the Romans, the Italians, Jews, and guys, it doesn't work that way. Jewish people were not all Sanhedrin members. Not all people who live in Italy were ancient Romans. Not all Germans were Nazis. Get out of that mindset. Not all Americans were tribal people destroying tribes of Native Americans. There's aggressive, harmful people, and there's lots of good people. So just don't even get into those wrestling matches of logistics and details and history buffs and whatever. Get into what really matters. The presence of God in a person would look like what? 6 foot? No, that's too literal. Do what he did. Respond the way he responded. Don't try to look how he looked. Just do what feels right. People say, but you try to look like, no, I don't. It just happened. I got kind of long hair because I like her longer hair. I have a beard because I thought, well, it looks kind of better. I thought I'm not really particularly that good looking, so this looks a little nicer. I thought it was a decent accent, the way a person might put eyelash, eyeliner, or whatever you call it. Stuff. I just thought it looked a little better. It's not like I could look like Jesus. It was really more like probably could use a little help. No, so. That's all it was. It wasn't a big plot. It wasn't to make myself look like. So we don't need to be Jewish. We don't need to be in a seamless robe. We don't need to have apostles. We just need to be the Christ as much as we can, as often as we can. Make a difference in people's lives. We're not always going to be able to do that. There's going to be days where we slip. Your job as the Christ would be to forgive yourself. To say, oops. It wasn't a good day. I got triggered. I vented. God, into your hands I surrender this day, including my guilts, my shames. Just keep giving it up. When all is said and done, the things that you still think you need to hold yourself responsible for and guilty for, you're going to find mean absolutely nothing. They're going to say, you're kidding. You're still holding on to that? But do you remember the next day you did this and that? That was much more important. Yeah, but one day I could have done better. It doesn't matter. But if you really, really want to hold yourself to it, that person that you got in an argument with, we'll send you back and we'll get you married to them if you want. It's actually all free will. If we would just say, when asked, who are you? I am as God created me. If you can say that, even if you don't totally believe it, make that be your answer that you're working to believe. Your life, your history, your karmas, and your contracts more and more thin out until they fade away. If all you do is I'm male, female, Jewish, non-Jewish, Gentile, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this religion, my mother didn't like me, my father didn't, whatever. If that's who your identity is, that's all they know you to be, because that's all they're mirroring back to you, and they're going to send you back to have to deal with more of your belief in your identity. Until you get over yourself and say, none of what I think of myself matters, I know not. What I do know is I am as God created me. And then all the power of the angels come to support you. Let's take a few centering breaths. I am as God created me. Hear that on the inhale, and so it is on the exhale, over and over, like a wave of personal self-hypnosis. I am as God created me, and so it is. The next few breaths, I will to be the Christ on earth. And so it is, over and over. Let me be as God created me. And let me accept all of God's gifts. Let me welcome in and accept all of God's gifts. Because I am as God created me, I will to be the Christ on earth. All is well. I'm locked in. I'm accepting that baptism of the Holy Spirit, the Divine Mother, who loves me, is constantly trying to shine light upon me and bring me beauty, gifts. And the human mind will then seek material gifts, which are fine, but what's important, the internal gifts, such as, and everyone, for the next minute or so, welcome in what you perceive to be gifts. Try not to go material. Think in terms of patience, infinite patience, healing power, absolute faith and conviction of who you are. Think of things that relate to consciousness and see which ones are important to you. Call them in, not just with your head. Hear them and feel them entering your being, charging your heart and soul with that consciousness. And let's do that for the next minute or so. And imagine as we close your complete immunity to all the stuff of this world. Taunting, doubting, gossip, persecutions, financial losses, romantic losses. Hold your center and remember the things you've just said to yourself. I am that I am. I am as God created me. Nothing has power, and anything that seems to is merely a test for me to see how I do, how much I believe in what I said. And watch these things happening around you and you maintaining your center. And still, if it brings up sadness and tears, then feel them for a moment. Allow it. Cry and hold yourself still centered in Christ. And hold yourself while that part of you mourns the loss. Too. All right, we're going to do our closing song. We want to sign off and we're going to say thank you to the people watching online. Actually, you can join us in the song. We're going to do the Jesus song. So if you guys don't mind standing, please. Thanks for your patience. We've gone a few minutes longer today. But many blessings to you all. Remember that down at the cafe there's munchies available. Remember next week is Psychic Sunday. So you're welcome if you're here in Sedona now or visiting later. Come and join each month. We have a Psychic Sunday that people can go up and work with some of the best readers, intuitives in town. And remember the bookstore is open, okay? Remember also this afternoon, Mastery Workshop. You have time to get lunch and come back, and we'll be streaming it online as well. So let's see. Mary Lou, you want to help me, please? All right. Since she's helped us record the music to this. You're welcome. All right. And let's see. So it has hand mudras to go with it, but simple words. So just follow, and most of you already know it. Okay? Go ahead and begin. Shut up. Thanks. A torch am I to you who behold me. Amen. A mirror am I to you who perceive me. Amen. A door am I to you who knock at me. Amen. A way am I to you, a wayfarer. Amen. Again. A torch am I to you who behold me. Amen. A mirror am I to you who perceive me. Amen. A door am I to you who knock at me. Amen. A way am I to you, a wayfarer. Amen. Gentlemen only. A torch am I to you who behold me. Look around. Amen. A mirror am I to you who perceive me. Amen. A door am I to you who knock at me. Amen. A way am I to you, a wayfarer. Amen. Ladies. A torch am I to you who behold me. Amen. A mirror am I to you who perceive me. Amen. A door am I to you who knock at me. Amen. A way am I to you, a wayfarer. Amen. Everyone, to all people on the planet, a torch am I to you who behold me. Amen. A mirror am I to you who perceive me. Amen. A door am I to you who knock at me. Amen. A way am I to you, a wayfarer. Amen. Let's just hold, please. Centering and holding all this in our hearts. We experienced something magnificent today, and we heard about historical magnificence. But this is all us. This is our destiny, to be this great, to be this wonderful to ourselves and each other. The world, in all its thinking and doing, will try to snuff this out. You cannot kill the Christ I am. You cannot smother it, stifle it, harm it in any way. So the more I become the Christ, the more I'm immune to all the stuff of this world. The light of God surrounds us.
We are the light of God.
The love of God enfolds us.
We are the love of God.
The power of God protects us.
We are the power of God.
And the presence of God watches over us.
We are the presence of God.
Wherever we are, God is, I am, we are, and so it is. Thank you. Peace be with you. Before you go, I want to let you know, the New Testament Volume 1 DVD set is the closest thing. I always try to let you know when you ask, to what we covered today. It has 4 different talks: Living the Christ Life, Sermon on the Mount, the Parables of Jesus, and Pentecost and Revelation, for those of you who are interested. God bless you all, and thanks for joining us today. We'll see you soon. You're welcome. You're welcome, guys. Thank you.